Okay, everyone, hi. Let's do the Iliad part 2. We're talking about the latter half of the Iliad now. Topics I want to cover today. We're going to see kleos, the ancient Greek value of glory in action, glory in battle. So we'll be talking a lot about the action scenes of the Iliad. Within that umbrella, we'll be talking about fate and how it operates in the epic, specifically through the chain of deaths, like how one man's death triggers the next man's and so on in a fated way. Those are the four deaths we'll talk about. We'll discuss kleos in battle in general. In some ways, we can see the glory as tied specifically to the human individual who's doing the fighting, but in some other ways, it's complicated because gods are behind a lot of these human actions. So you might ask yourself, like, who is actually being glorified in these scenes? We'll talk about the symbols and manifestations of glory, specifically through Greek practices involving the bodies of the dead and the armor of the dead, the fallen heroes. So this will kind of intersect with customs about funeral rites for the ancient Greeks. We'll talk about that. The shield of Achilles is this very important symbol in the history of art and culture in the West, and it kind of comes out of this symbol of glory of armor. So Achilles' new shield that gets fashioned for him. And then we'll be able to answer the question that we started with last time. Why is Achilles so angry, and what finally brings that anger or rage to an end? Okay, so we have this kind of like very contemplative slide. Kind of reminded me of Gilgamesh a little bit in the deep. At the end of Book 9, we see Achilles contemplating his choice between two fates, and he refuses to enter the war. So that's where we left off last time, at the end of Book 9. He has these options available to him. He's unique among men in having a choice in the matter, and yet he refuses to enter the war. He keeps from making the definitive choice. He stays at the war, at the outskirts of the battle, but he refuses to enter into the battle. He also refuses to go home. So he's like actively not choosing. What finally makes him choose kleos in battle, glory in battle, and a short life? So that's what we'll be talking about today. Why does he enter the war? Okay, so to get us in the mood for battle, you might pause this video and watch one of these trailers. There's a video game that came out several years ago in the Assassin's Creed universe called Odyssey. It's really kind of exciting, and you get to play as this kind of epic hero who's on his quest for glory and family and these sorts of things. It kind of combines the Iliad and the Odyssey in one. And then you might choose also, there was a Hollywood movie in 2004 called Troy. There's very, like, quote-unquote sexy dudes in it. Like, if you like Brad Pitt, or Eric Bana, these guys, what's his name? Orlando Bloom's in it, too. Anyway, you might want to watch one of these just to get you in the mood for battle. We'll be talking about a lot of scenes of carnage and glorious masculinity and violence. It's pretty exciting. So get in the mood. Okay, so here's just sort of images of the two I was suggesting. Okay, I'll keep going though. Okay, so in terms of fate, how the Iliad is structured is through these, we focus in on the deaths of four men in particular, which bring about the fall of Troy. So here they are. I made those in green correspond to the Trojans who fall, and then the blue are the Achaeans. So the first one to fall in this chain of the cycle of deaths is Sarpedon. Sarpedon's a Trojan. He's killed by Patroclus, Achilles' best friend. So because Patroclus kills Sarpedon, Hector gets very angry and kills Patroclus. Because Patroclus has been killed by Hector, that spurs Achilles to enter the fight, and his rage is targeted at Hector. So Achilles kills Hector. And then finally, we have this sort of implication of Achilles' death. We don't ever get to see it, which is kind of interesting. I might ask you why that is that we don't see Achilles die in this epic. But anyway. Okay, so each death in this cycle of four relates in some specific way to Achilles, leading him to his fate, which is mortality and glory in battle. So it's obvious that his own death in this fourth one is related to his death, of course. But each one, even Sarpedon's death, is related to Achilles in a specific way. So I'll be asking you about that as we go through each of these men's deaths. So as we discuss them, I want you to picture the scene that's being described, track what's happening to Achilles' armor in each battle scene, because it keeps changing bodies. Different people own it at different times. Who's wearing the armor of Achilles? What does that imply about what's happening? And yeah, that's it. So, okay, let's get started with Sarpedon. So this is the first step in the chain of deaths. So just to set the scene, this Trojan War has been going on again for 9 years. Everyone's very tired. They really want to go home. The Achaean side is having this very petty fight over seemingly nothing, and yet everything at the same time for Achilles. Ultimately, the death of Sarpedon is the thing that kind of triggers the beginning of the end of the Trojan War. Okay, so this is how it starts with Sarpedon. We start with Zeus. So Zeus, contemplating Sarpedon's death. These are my lines, and this is Zeus's lines. I'm quoting from the Fagles translation here. My cruel fate, my Sarpedon, the man I love the most, my own son, doomed to die at the hands of Menoetius' son Patroclus. My heart is torn in two as I try to weigh all this. Shall I pluck him up now while he's still alive, and set him down in the rich green land of Lycia, far from the war at Troy and all its tears, or beat him down at Patroclus' hands at last? Well, this continues, but I'll pause here. This is Zeus thinking about things. Zeus is the father of all the gods. He should be the one in most control, but he's torn here. He knows Sarpedon is fated to die. He's doomed to die, that is, at the hands of Patroclus, and yet he's torn. He doesn't want his son to die, and he contemplates plucking him up, like literally picking Sarpedon up out of the battle and saving him and putting him in his homeland. Okay, so this is what Zeus is thinking about. His wife weighs in, but Queen Hera, her eyes wide, protested strongly. Dread Majesty, son of Kronos, what are you saying? A man, a mere mortal, his doom sealed long ago? You'd set him free from all the pains of death? Do as you please, Zeus, but none of the deathless gods will ever praise you. And I tell you this, take it to heart, I urge you, if you send Sarpedon home living still, beware. Then surely some other god will want to sweep his own son clear of the heavy fighting too. Look down, many who battle round King Priam's mighty walls are sons of the deathless gods. You will inspire lethal anger in them all. So Hera's making some really good points here. Hera's sometimes treated as very petty goddess, but here she's making great points. She's asking her husband, the king, to consider what he's saying. If he chooses to save Sarpedon, a man who's fated to die, all of the other deathless gods might revolt. None of the deathless gods will praise you. Beware, some other god will want to sweep his own son clear of the heavy fighting too. Look down, many who battle, blah, blah, blah. A lot of this kind of just gives you a sense of the stakes of the conflict. You know, the gods in some ways are very, very away from the battle. They are deathless gods. They're immortal. They'll never die. But a lot of them do have these children, or just humans that they love, who are in danger of death down below. And so Zeus has this particular problem that actually is the problem of a lot of the gods out here. Like we met Thetis, whose son Achilles is also fated to die at Troy, or, you know, if he chooses to go home, sure. So anyway, they all have this sort of issue. Okay, so let's keep going. But this is kind of like a moment where we are like sort of humanizing the gods in a sense. They do seem like fathers and mothers here who care for their children who are going to die. Okay, so here's the actual death scene of Sarpedon. This is very exciting. Homer is he's being kind of like a great director here. You know, notice how he brings about Sarpedon's death. So we see Sarpedon die right at the moment when he's trying his hardest to keep living. Sarpedon has this speech that's very rousing. He's speaking to his fellow soldier Glaucus. So Sarpedon, here I'm Sarpedon now. Okay, Glaucus, oh dear friend, dear fighter, soldier, soldier, now is the time to prove yourself a spearman, a daring man of war. Now, if you are brave, you'll hang your head in shame every day in your life if the Argives strip my armor here at the anchored ships where I have gone down fighting. Hold on, full force, spur all our men to battle. Death cut him short. The end closed in around him, swirling down his eyes, choking off his breath. Patroclus planted a heel against his chest, wrenched the spear from his wound, and the midriff came out with it. So he dragged out both the man's life breath and the weapon's point together. Close by, the Myrmidons clung to the panting stallions, straining to bolt away, free of their master's chariot. So notice what Homer has done here. Sarpedon has this very rousing speech. He's trying to get Glaucus to help him. Let's do it full force. Let's get all of our men, to battle. And then the same line of poetry is here. So like the line goes here, and then we have this kind of like caesura is what it's called in poetic form. It's a bit of a break, but as Sarpedon ceases to speak, the thing that cuts him short is the thing that cuts his line short too, in a sense, is death. So he gets this line out, and then all of a sudden he's stabbed in the belly. It seems like death cut him short. The end. So he's dying. The end closed around him. Death is closing around him, swirling his eyes out, choking out his breath. And then we see that Sarpedon has died before we figure out who has even killed him. And we learn it here in this sentence. Patroclus planted a heel against his chest. So the implication here is that Sarpedon has been stabbed in the chest by a spear, and that's what killed him. And then we see who killed him when we see Patroclus wrenching the spear from the wound of Sarpedon. And as he wrenches the spear, the midriff came out with it, meaning this is your belly. So the spear is pulled out and the guts kind of come out with the spear. It's pretty gross. So yeah, very exciting. I kind of like scenes of carnage. If you like violent movies, you can see sort of a direct line from Homer to sort of very violent movies. Anyway, okay, so this is his death scene. It's kind of exciting. Of course, it's also very sad. So why is Sarpedon's death so important to the epic? What does it in particular symbolize? Here's some lines from Glaucus. So Glaucus was the man who Sarpedon was trying to rally into battle. After Sarpedon's death, Glaucus says, "Our bravest man is dead, Sarpedon, Zeus' son." Did Zeus stand by him? Not even his own son. So maybe it's important that Sarpedon's dying because he's very brave, but I think it's also very important that it's Zeus' son who's dead. This would be very, very chilling for the people on the battlefield. Up until now, maybe lower status people have died, I guess, in the battle. That's kind of a cruel thing to say, but here we've got the son of the father of all the gods, the king of all the gods, Zeus. His son is now dead. Zeus didn't stand by his own son. Yikes. This is like what would happen if, like if a president of the United States sent their kid to war and then the kid died. It would be like very, very sad, but also very scary for the other people who are on the battlefield. Like if that kid could die, what does that mean for anybody else? Like this is sort of very, very telling about the nature of the conflict and how far it's going to go in terms of death, like how dramatic it will be. Okay. All right, so Sarpedon's death. Okay, so Sarpedon's death is also important because what happens to his body after he dies. Just to kind of remind you of Sarpedon's lines here. "You'll hang your head in shame every day of your life if the Argives strip my armor here at the anchored ships, where I have gone down fighting." So Sarpedon warns Glaucus that it will be a shame to Glaucus if he lets the Greeks strip Sarpedon's armor. That's exactly what's going to happen. Here's the scene where the Greeks are stripping the armor from the body of Sarpedon. Okay, not even a hawk-eyed scout could still make out Sarpedon, the man's magnificent body covered over head to toe, buried under a mass of weapons, blood, and dust. But they still kept swarming round and round the corpse, like flies in a sheepfold buzzing over the brimming pails in the first spring days when the buckets flood with milk. So veteran troops kept swarming round the corpse, never pausing, nor did mighty Zeus for a moment turn his shining eyes from the clash of battle. He kept them fixed on the struggling mass forever, the father's spirit churning, thrashing out the ways, the numberless ways, to cause Patroclus' slaughter. Okay, this is very exciting language down here, but this is a very strange epic simile. So note what's being described here. Sarpedon's body, he's just been murdered by Patroclus. Now his body is completely covered over head to toe under a mass of weapons, blood, and dust. So what happens when someone falls in these Greek conflicts is everybody kind of goes crazy trying to get the armor of the dead man. Why? Well, think about it. Like, why would you want Sarpedon's armor? He is the son of Zeus. He probably has some really, really nice armor. This is also a time when everybody's armor is very unique. It speaks to them as a person. It might have iconography about their family line or, where they're from, that kind of thing. So if you're able to grab the armor of a dead man, you kind of get the glory of having killed that person. So that's kind of what's going on here. So everyone is clamoring over the body of Sarpedon. And here's the simile. They still kept swarming round the corpse like flies in a sheepfold, buzzing over pails of milk. So who's the they? These are the soldiers. The soldiers are swarming around Sarpedon's body as if they were flies swarming over milk. So it's a pretty creepy simile, since we're thinking of, humans acting like a food source, Sarpedon's body is a bit like milk here, and the flies is kind of nobody really likes flies, they're kind of gross, but, they want to eat. They want to eat the milk. They want to, maybe lay their eggs in the milk or something like this. Anyway, so the veteran troops kept swarming around the corpse, not pausing. And then Zeus is getting more and more mad. So remember, Zeus is up in the heavens, kind of looking down on this. He's staring at what's happening to his son's body, and his spirit is churning, and he's thrashing out the ways, the numberless ways, to cause Patroclus' slaughter. So Zeus has his eyes now fixed on Patroclus. Patroclus is the one who's killed his son, Sarpedon. So now Zeus wants to bring about Patroclus' death. Exciting. Okay, what happens to Sarpedon's body? Okay, so here's a little bit more. What's nice about Sarpedon's body is even though his armor gets stolen from him, Zeus is able to step in and save his son's body. After the Greeks steal the armor of the fallen man, sometimes they'll do even worse things to the body of the fallen man. They'll desecrate the corpse. This is all sort of an attempt to heighten their own glory at the expense of the fallen soldier. Okay, so Sarpedon, sprawled there in the muster of the dead, for men by the squad had dropped across his corpse. Once Zeus stretched tight the lethal line of battle. So now the men are dropping across the corpse of Sarpedon. Okay, so then the Achaeans, these are the Greeks, ripped the armor off his back, Sarpedon's gleaming bronze that Menoetius' son, the brave Patroclus, flung in the arms of cohorts, poised to speed those trophies back to the beaked ships. So here's the lines again about how the armor becomes a trophy for the victor. So, and storming Zeus was stirring up Apollo. So remember, Zeus and Apollo have kind of an affinity for the Trojans. So Zeus tells Apollo, on with it now, sweep Sarpedon clear of the weapons. Phoebus, my friend. Phoebus is another name for Apollo, by the way. Once you wipe the dark blood from his body, bear him far from the fighting, off and away, and bathe him well in a river's running tides, and anoint him with deathless ambrosial robes. Then send him on his way with the windswept escorts, twin brothers sleep in death, who with all good speed will set him down in the broad green land of Lycia. There his brothers and countrymen will bury the prince, with full royal rites, with mounded tomb and pillar. These are the solemn honors owed to the dead. So these lines here, I think Homer is including to demonstrate what a good death should look like. A sort of funeral ritual with the body anointed and respected. Note that he wants Apollo to bring Sarpedon's body back to the land of Lycia, where Sarpedon is from. This is where he wanted to save him before. So Zeus couldn't save Sarpedon. He couldn't save his life, but he can save his body from desecration. By desecration, I mean like, it means desacralizing, desecration. So he's saving the body of Sarpedon from being dismembered and stabbed and humiliated because that's what the Greeks want to do to his body. Okay, this is pretty harsh stuff. Okay, here is the question I asked before. How does Sarpedon's death relate to Achilles? And I wrote, hint, think about Achilles' armor. Just because you might not have gathered what the importance of this, I just have the lines here. Just quote. I screenshot this from your PDF. This was included in a summary between book 9 and book 16 that I had you read. So after Achilles after his refusal to enter battle in book 9, the situation of the Greeks worsened rapidly. Agamemnon, Diomedes, and Odysseus were all wounded. The Trojans breached the stockade and fought beside the ships. So the Trojans almost win. They're fighting beside the ships. That means that they get all the way to the shoreline. Patroclus tried to bring Achilles to the aid of the Greeks, but the most he could obtain was permission for himself to fight, clad in Achilles' armor at the head of the Myrmidons. So this is an important kind of plot point. Patroclus begs his friend to fight because they need him. Achilles refuses, but he says, okay, I'm not going to fight, but here, you can wear my armor, and you can join the battle, dressed as me. So there is a sense that Patroclus kills Sarpedon. That might mean that Patroclus is a very good soldier, but I think he's also boosted by the fact that he's wearing Achilles' armor. When Patroclus enters the war wearing Achilles' armor, it might make the Trojans think that Achilles is back in the battle. They might be extra scared. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on here. So there's sort of like an impersonation potentially going on. Patroclus dressed as Achilles. Okay, so all right. So now this is like sort of the second step in the chain of deaths, the cycle of deaths. Patroclus is the next person to die. So he's on the Achaean side. Hector will kill him. So who causes his death? It's kind of up in the air because in some ways it's Hector, but it might be someone else. Okay, Patroclus giving cry to Automedon, so another soldier, whipping on his team. Patroclus went for Troy's and Lycia's lines, blind in his fatal frenzy, luckless soldier. If only he had obeyed Achilles' strict command, he might have escaped his doom, the stark night of death. But the will of Zeus will always overpower the will of men, Zeus who strikes fear in even the bravest man of war and tears away his triumph, all in a lightning flash, and at other times he will spur a man to battle, just as he urged Patroclus' fury now. So this is kind of interesting. Patroclus, after he kills Sarpedon, he's very excited. He's whipping his team of horses on. He's in a fatal frenzy, running towards the Trojan lines. Achilles had warned him. Well, he actually commanded him. Achilles strictly commanded him to not go too far towards the Trojan lines. But Patroclus, he's in a frenzy, and he starts running towards them because he's so like hopped up on his glory, his ability to kill the son of Zeus. You can probably imagine how you'd feel if you were able to kill the son of Zeus, But then here, Zeus is very angry. The will of Zeus will always overpower the will of men. It's said here that Zeus urged Patroclus' fury now. So remember that Zeus really wants Patroclus to die, and so this might be part of his manipulation strategy. He's urging Patroclus to be furious, to run in fatal frenzy, to be kind of stupid in his glory, Okay, so maybe Zeus is kind of tipping the scales towards Patroclus' death now. For revenge. Okay, Hector. So Hector is the human who will kill Patroclus, but okay, so here we're turning to Hector. Hector, waiting, watching the great-hearted Patroclus trying to stagger free, seeing him wounded there. So there's actually, this goes on for a long time, the death of Patroclus, but there's a moment where Patroclus is hit in the head, and it seems like he might have gotten a concussion or something like that. They don't use those terms, but he's very, stupefied. So here's Hector, waiting, watching the great-hearted Patroclus trying to stagger free, seeing him wounded there with a sharp bronze come rushing into him right across the lines, and rammed his spear shaft home, stabbing deep in the guts, and the brazen point went jutting straight out through Patroclus' back. So while Patroclus is trying to stagger free, he's kind of dazed. Hector comes rushing in and stabs him deep in the guts through his back. So through his guts, and then the spear comes out his back. Okay, so down he crashed. This is Patroclus. Down Patroclus crashed. Horror gripped the Achaean armies, as when some lion overpowers a tireless wild boar up on a mountain summit, battling in all their fury over a little spring of water, both beasts craving to slake their thirst, but the lion beats him down with sheer brute force as the boar fights for breath. So now, with a close thrust, Hector, the son of Priam, tore the life from the fighting son of Menoetius. So we have another really wonderful epic simile here, where Hector killing Patroclus in battle is being likened to a lion overpowering a boar when both are trying to just drink water up on a mountain pass. So you might ask yourself, if you're going to write a paper, spoiler alert, I'm going to ask you to write a paper about Homer. If you write about this passage, for example, you might think a lot about this epic simile and the ways in which it's apt, the ways in which likening Hector and Patroclus to a lion and a boar makes sense logically. And then on the flip side, you might ask yourself, well, how is it not appropriate to liken this scene of battle to a mountain scene? Are Patroclus and Hector really fighting over water? Are they really like animals, just trying to survive? Or is something else going on? Okay, keep going. Patroclus, even though he's doomed to die, he gets these great lines. He gets to kind of curse Hector in his last breaths. So, struggling for breath, you answered Patroclus, O my writer. So this is Homer speaking here, the poet. When he says you, it's just kind of like the poet is getting excited and as if the poet is talking to Patroclus, as if he's alive and before him as he's narrating the story. Okay, so struggling for breath, you answered Patroclus, O my writer. So Patroclus says, Hector, now is your time to glory to the skies. Now the victory is yours, a gift of the son of Kronos, Zeus, Apollo too. They brought me down with all their deathless ease. They are the ones who tore the armor off my back. Even if 20 Hectors had charged against me, they'd all have died here, laid low by my spear. No, deadly fate in league with Apollo killed me. You came third. And all you could do was finish off my life. One more thing, take it to heart, I urge you. You too, you won't live long yourself, I swear. Already I see them looming up beside you, death and the strong force of fate to bring you down at the hands of Aeacus's great royal son Achilles. So I don't know how to pronounce that, but anyway, so note here, Patroclus is trying to strip the glory from Hector in killing him. So it's like, yeah, the victory is yours, Hector, but actually it was Zeus and Apollo who had it against me, who are the real reasons why I'm dead. And also fate. It was fate that killed me. So note all the ways in which the gods and fate are rhetorically brought up to diminish the glory of Hector in killing Patroclus. Maybe they were literally, diminishing Hector's glory, but anyway, very exciting here. And then, of course, this is very true. Patroclus sees the writing on the wall for Hector. He's going to die soon, too. And he will. Okay, so now we're tracking what happens to his body. This is a really very poignant scene. We learn what happens to Patroclus's body through a messenger speaking to Achilles. So this is book 18. Someone comes into Achilles' camp and says he has to break the news that Achilles' best friend, Patroclus, is dead. Ah, son of royal Peleus, this is Achilles' father, so Achilles, what you must hear from me, what painful news. Would to God it had never happened. Patroclus has fallen. They're fighting over his corpse. He's stripped naked. Hector, with that flashing helmet, Hector has your arms. So, wow. What a line to get Achilles' attention. So his best friend has died, and the Trojans are now fighting over the corpse of his best friend. So he's stripped naked, he's been humiliated, and remember that Patroclus was wearing Achilles' armor. Hector now has the armor of Achilles. Oh my gosh, think of how you would feel as Achilles. You loaned this armor to your best friend, and now he's not only dead, but your sworn enemy, the man who killed your best friend, is now sort of glorying over your misfortune. He has your armor. Whew, crazy. Okay, and then here's more about Patroclus's body. So as for Patroclus, there seemed no hope that the Achaeans could drag the corpse of Achilles' comrade out of range. So the Achaeans, again, these are the Greeks. These are so the side of Agamemnon and Achilles. They try to drag Patroclus's body out of the range of the Trojans. Okay, 3 times illustrious Hector shouted for support, seized his feet from behind, wild to drag him off. 3 times the Aeantes, armored in battle fury, fought him off the corpse. So, like, literally, Hector and the Trojans are fighting over the body of Patroclus with the Aeantes, or the Greeks. The helmed Aeantes could no more frighten Hector, the proud son of Priam, back from Patroclus's corpse than shepherds out in the field can scare a tawny lion off his kill when the hunger drives the beast claw mad. So again, another epic simile where this sort of scene of nature where like a lion is trying to take its kill home with him when he's hungry. That's being compared to Hector. Hector is trying to take Patroclus's body as if he's a hungry lion. It's kind of interesting, you know. You might pause a minute and think about Hector. You know, the last time we talked about Hector, we talked about what a great father and husband and son he was. But here we see him in battle going crazy as if he's driven by hunger over a kill. So that might say something to you about the nature of battle and what it does to people's emotions. Okay, this aspect of Patroclus's body is very important. So this first off, I'll speak to this. This is from I think it's from a piece of pottery, but it's just it's a scene. I think this is Achilles and this is Patroclus. Achilles and Patroclus are best friends. They're a bit like Gilgamesh and Enkidu. You could think of them that way. There's a bit of a class difference between them. Achilles is the son of a king, so he's a prince. Patroclus is not. I think he was actually bought as a slave. But anyway, they grow to be best friends. In some traditions, and Plato will talk about this later, they're sort of taken to be lovers, you know, that they love each other literally. So there might be a little bit of hints of that in Homer, so I invite you to look for those hints, but definitely like a bromance, I guess, a relationship amongst friends, sort of brothers, sort of lovers, similar to Enkidu and Gilgamesh. Okay, so what happens to Patroclus's body? This becomes the means by which Achilles is drawn into battle. Iris, she's a goddess. She is the sort of personification of the rainbow. So if you speak Spanish, arco iris, you might know that term, the arc, like the rainbow, the arch. Iris is a messenger goddess, and she's sort of like employed mostly by Hera, so the Zeus's wife. So Hera has always been on the side of the Achaeans. Here she sends Iris down to speak to Achilles, and Iris says, "Up with you, no more lying low. Writhe with shame at the thought. Patroclus may be sport for the dogs of Troy. Yours, the shame will be yours if your comrade's corpse goes down to the dead defiled." So here's that same idea that, like, if a corpse is defiled, it brings shame not only to the corpse but to anyone who does not protect the corpse. And Iris here is making the rhetorical argument that Patroclus's shame won't be his shame but will be Achilles' shame. The shame will be yours, Achilles, if your comrade's corpse goes down defiled. So, okay, yeah, I thought I had something over here, but I guess I don't. Okay, never mind. Okay, here we go. This is very exciting. So I love this part. So I'll probably get excited as I read it. Okay, this is super exciting scene. This is in book 18. Right after Iris tells Achilles to get up off of his, quit sitting around and like wasting time. Like your friend is being defiled. You need to get out there. Iris, racing the wind, went veering off, as Achilles, Zeus's favorite fighter, rose up now, and over his powerful shoulder Pallas slung the shield. Pallas is Athena. Pallas slung the shield, the tremendous storm shield, with all its tassels flaring, and crowning his head, the goddess swept a golden cloud, and from it she lit a fire to blaze across the field. So here we get that Athena is helping Achilles. She sweeps this cloud for him, whatever. As smoke goes towering up the sky from out a town cut off on a distant island under siege, enemies battling round it, defenders all day long, trading desperate blows from their own city walls. But soon as the sun goes down, their signal fires flash, rows of beacons blazing into the air to alert their neighbors. If only they'll come in, ships to save them from disaster. So now from Achilles' head, the blaze shot up the sky. I'm going to pause there because this is a very long epic simile. What's being described here is kind of like a lighthouse. So like when there's a battle and the sun is going down, and there's, hope is kind of dwindling, all of a sudden signal fires flash and beacons blaze into the air to alert the neighbors. So it's kind of like, if you've seen that part of The Lord of the Rings where there's like a fire that's a signal that brings everyone, it's like a symbol that allows people to, come to battle, that kind of thing. It's kind of like a lighthouse, this moment when the light shines out in the darkness. Okay, so that moment kind of is being described here, and it's being likened to what's coming out of Achilles' head. Okay, so Pallas slung the shield and crowned Achilles' head. She sweeps his head with this golden cloud, and from it she lit a fire to blaze across the field. So there's this blaze coming from Achilles' head. Okay, so now from Achilles' head the blaze shot up the sky. He strode from the rampart, took his stand at the trench. So there he rose and loosed an enormous cry, and off in the distance Pallas shrieked too, and drove an unearthly panic through the Trojans. So like literally, Achilles shrieks into the air, and Pallas, Pallas Athena is the goddess of war. She's shrieking as well. It's very scary here. The Trojans, hearing the brazen voice of Aeacides, all their spirits quaked, even sleek-maned horses, sensing death in the wind, slowed their chariots round, and charioteers were struck dumb when they saw that fire, relentless, terrible, burst from the proud-hearted Achilles' head. Blazing as fiery-eyed Athena fueled the flames. Like, if you picture what's going on here, there's this fire blazing out of Achilles' head. This is horrifying. And it not only, it's horrifying to hear it, but it obviously is really scaring the Trojans. All of these horses start freaking out. This is a bit of a joke, but it kind of reminds me of, this series, Dragon Ball Z, when the little guy with black hair, sorry, I think his name is Goku, when he becomes Super Saiyan or whatever, all this fire comes out and he's super more powerful. He also becomes blonde for some reason. But anyway, there's light, beacons of light kind of thing. And then if you're watching this show that when the guy transforms into this version of himself, he's down to fight and kind of on the sort of cosmic divine level. So that seems to be what's going on with Achilles here. Maybe more. I might, if we were in class together, I'd ask you what you think this moment symbolizes. Why does Achilles become this superhuman symbol, for the goddess of war? I'll just kind of list some things people have said, critics and other students I've had. Some people think that this is a moment where Achilles literally becomes the personification of war. He has been helped by Athena here. So perhaps it's that. Maybe he's personifying war. Maybe he's personifying rage. Like I told you, how this whole epic is structured around Achilles' rage. And this is the thing that really triggers Achilles at his most wrathful and relentless and murderous, the death of his friend. So this is sort of he's the personification of divine rage, Melis here. It's probably other things. Maybe I'll have a discussion question for that. Anyway, maybe this is the god part of Achilles coming through here. We know he's a mortal man, but, he does have a mother who's a goddess, so perhaps this is part of that. Okay, this continues. Okay, so then he's going to keep screaming this war cry. So 3 times the brilliant Achilles gave his great war cry over the trench. 3 times the Trojans and famous allies whirled in panic, and 12 of their finest fighters died then and there, crushed by chariots, impaled on their own spears. And now the exulting Argives seized the chance to drag Patroclus's body quickly out of range and laid him on a litter. Okay, so this war cry, this kind of driving fear into the hearts of the Trojans has been strategic. Again, Athena is the goddess of war, but also, specifically strategy, like wartime strategy. So his really horrifying cry has been a means to scare the Trojans off enough that they can seize the body of Patroclus and save his body. Okay, so then we have this kind of short funeral scene for Patroclus. Standing round him, loving comrades mourned, and the great swift runner Achilles joined them grieving, weeping warm tears when he saw his steadfast comrade lying dead on the bier, mauled by tearing bronze. The man he sent to war with team and chariot, but never welcomed home alive again. Okay, so we have this kind of sad moment here. But they do get Patroclus's body back, which is significant. This has been a scene that has inspired a lot of art. Here's I think this is from it's Etruscan relief. So kind of later than what we're studying in this class, but still in antiquity. The men kind of carrying the naked body of Patroclus out of the battle to care for his body, to give it a proper burial. Okay, so this, just to kind of step back and think about this. Achilles is finally back in action. The death of Patroclus gives him reasons that he had been lacking before. He was sort of like between his decision. He didn't know what exactly to do, and he couldn't decide. Patroclus's death gives Achilles a reason to fight, a real reason. He now has revenge. He can avenge the death of his best friend. He now has a target for his anger. Remember, before he was angry at everyone, it seemed like. He was angry at fate, maybe his mother, perhaps. Definitely angry at Agamemnon. He said he wasn't really angry at the Trojans at all, but now Hector, the best Trojan soldier, has killed his friend, so now he has a target, an appropriate target for his anger. Hector. This is kind of flippant, but there also kind of is a great moment for kind of a makeover scene. Achilles, his armor has been taken first by Patroclus as a gift, and then now it's been taken by Hector. So now Achilles has no armor and needs new armor. And he'll get that, which we'll talk about soon. And then we have this kind of interesting moment among the gods. So remember that Hera has always been on the side of the Greeks, the Achaeans, meaning like Achilles and Agamemnon. Zeus has been more torn. Like, he really loves the Trojans. He really loves the Achaeans too. Zeus turned to Hera, his wife and sister, and said, "So, my ox-eyed queen, you've had your way at last, setting the famous runner Achilles on his feet. Mother Hera, look, these long-haired Achaeans must be sprung of your own immortal loins." So Zeus is kind of being a little bit bitter here. Zeus knows that when Achilles enters the battle, that Troy will fall. He knows that Hector's going to die. He knows that Priam will die. He knows that all of Troy basically will be ruined. And Zeus loves Troy, so now he's kind of sad. He turns to his wife and says, "Well, aren't you happy now? You must be the mother of all these guys. Look, these Achaeans must be sprung from your immortal loins." So Zeus is being a little bit petty here to his wife. But Hera, in her response, makes this other point. But her eyes widening, noble Hera answered, "Dread Majesty, son of Cronos, what are you saying? Even a mortal man will act to help a friend, condemned as mortal always is to death, and hardly endowed with wisdom deep as ours." So even though Hera might have reason to rejoice in Achilles re-entering the battle because she just likes to see Trojans die or whatever, that's not her concern here. She's like, of course Achilles is going to enter the battle. His best friend died. What else can you do? Mortals especially, because they have so short, because their lives are so short, of course they're going to help their friends. So we kind of have this kind of testament to friendship here that even the immortal gods understand. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so then we have this moment. Achilles basically decides to rejoin the battle. This has been a hard moment. It's been a hard decision for him, and we see the implications of his decision through his mother's eyes. Thetis is an immortal goddess. She was sort of forced into marrying a mortal man so that her son wouldn't overpower his father. Well, so that her son wouldn't overpower an immortal father. But what sucks for Thetis is that her son is going to die and she's going to continue to live because she's a goddess. She'll live forever. And so, this is really sad for her. She sees her son choosing to enter the battle, choosing to die. And then think how you'd feel if you were a mother to a son choosing to die. It's quite poignant and sad. Thetis answered, warning through her tears, "You're doomed to a short life, my son, from all you say. For hard on the heels of Hector's death, your death must come at once." So she's making a very reasonable point, but note that this line gets broken here. Achilles jumps in right away and finishes the line. "Then let me die at once." Achilles burst out, despairing. "Since it was not my fate to save my dearest comrade from his death, look, a world away from his fatherland he's perished, lacking me, my fighting strength to defend him. But now, since I shall not return to my fatherland, nor did I bring one ray of hope to my Patroclus, nor to the rest of all my steadfast comrades, countless ranks struck down by mighty Hector. No, no, here I sit by the ships, a useless dead weight on the good green earth, not in battle, only in wars of words that others win." So we have this moment where Achilles, it's as if his mind is already made up. He's like, if I have to die, then let me die. He feels pulled, like it's like not a choice anymore, where before he couldn't choose because the choice was so difficult. Now the choice is taken away from him. He has to help because he wasn't there to protect his friend. Excuse me. I don't know how you feel about Achilles, but here I feel so sad for him. This word despair is a very heavy word. When people despair, they have literally no hope. Despair is the lack of hope. So he has no hope anymore. He seems resigned to his fate. He says, "I sit here by the ships, so I was sitting here by the ships when my friend died," and he calls himself a useless dead weight on the good green earth. So what he's saying here is as long as he's sitting, he's useless. The only good he has is in battle. So this is, quite sad for, when I think of poor Achilles. Before, when he was thinking about what the purpose of life was, he had these wonderful kind of philosophical thoughts about, what life should be, what he wants it to be. And here he seems to accept that actually the only thing he's good for is killing, is being a soldier. It's kind of sad. So Achilles chooses his fate. He chooses to die. He chooses to be a soldier because that seems to be all he's good for. And then we have this moment when we get the shield of Achilles. Okay, so this is a really important moment in the history of art and culture in the West. Thetis, so she knows her son is going to die and leave her. So she decides to do this tribute to him. He's now without armor, so she asks Hephaestus, who is the smith god, he's the one who made Pandora, for example. She asks him to make new armor for Achilles, which is significant. Usually the gods don't make things like this for a human, but Thetis is asking for divine armor for her human son. So she wants armor, quote, armor that any man in the world of men will marvel at through all the years to come, whoever sees its splendor. So note how repetitive this is, any man in the world of men. This is kind of interesting. It's lots of emphasis on the fact that this is going to be marvel, it's going to be wondrous. Like whoever sees it is going to completely be stupefied with wonder with this armor. Just so you know, in the history of art, the Shield of Achilles in Book 18 is the sort of preeminent example of this Greek term ekphrasis. We use it in English too, but ekphrasis is the poetic verbal description of a work of visual art. So ekphrasis it's kind of interesting. You're describing something that's visual, but what ekphrasis is trying to do is to demonstrate that poetry is, in a sense, better than visual art, because poetry can describe things that can't really exist in reality, that you can only imagine in your mind. Okay, so as you read Book 18, the description of the shield is crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on. As you're reading it, you try to picture it. It's kind of like it's kind of impossible to picture this shield. However, someone in the 19th century in England tried to draw it, which sort of defeats the purpose behind behind a Crassus. But here we are. That's what Victorians like to do. They'd like to literalize things. So anyway, this person does their best to try to depict each scene that is depicted on the shield. But as you read the shield, the scenes seem to move. You know, it's as if all these things have moving parts and stuff like that. But like in the center, there's around are the constellations of the galaxies. Then there's scenes from life, a trial scene, a marriage, and then scenes from sort of like agrarian stuff, city scenes. There's like everything on the shield. I could have quoted pretty much anything, but I picked this moment just because I like it. I like the description. So the crippled smith, that's Hephaestus. He brought all this art to bear on a dancing circle. Here young boys and girls, beauties courted, with costly gifts of oxen, danced and danced, linking their arms, gripping each other's waists, and the girls wore robes of linen, light and flowing, etc., etc. So they're like, you know, tumblers are dashing and springing, whirling and leaping in handsprings. So I think it might be this one. Yeah, there's a tumbler. But yeah, like all this stuff that's going on, it's like life. You might ask yourself, why? Why put all this stuff on a shield? What's going on? I'll have a discussion question about this. Why do you think Hephaestus and Thetis put all of these scenes on Achilles' shield? What's the point of that? This is a shield that he's going to use to defend himself in a battle. It's in part a symbol of death, you know? I mean, you don't make a shield unless you think you might die. And in fact, Achilles will die. So this scene of the symbol of war, the symbol of battle, the symbol of death gets depicted all throughout it with life and with the cycles of life, the cycles of the year, with the constellations, weddings, court cases, all this stuff. Those like things that Achilles will probably never get to see again, you know, because he's going to die at Troy. So anyway, this is a very kind of moving tribute, a lot to say about it, so I'll ask you what you think about the shield in a question. Okay, now we finally have the long-awaited scene between Achilles and Hector. So these are the two best fighters on either side of the war. Here are some various descriptions of them as they're fighting. As Hector realizes what's going to happen, first he's brave and he's like, okay, I'm going to face him like a man. I'm going to go out there alone, face Achilles. But then he starts running because he's totally afraid. And who could blame him? Achilles has just appeared as sort of like the personification of divine wrath and rage and war. Of course you'd be completely horrified. So here's some similes that happen. One is a wild mountain hawk swooping down on a cringing dove. So I think this is Achilles the hawk, Hector the dove. At another point, they're running like powerful stallions or horses, sweeping around the post for trophies. So sometimes they're running around the gates of Troy. It seems like they're just running a race for a game with, you know, trophies. Sometimes, again, they're like predator and prey. A hound in the mountains starts a fawn from its lair. Hound versus fawn, that's a little baby deer. They run around for a long time with Achilles chasing Hector. And then finally Zeus says enough, right? Okay, so Father Zeus held out his sacred golden scales. In them he placed two fates of death that lays men low. One for Achilles, one for Hector, breaker of horses. And gripping the beam mid-haft, the father raised it high, and down went Hector's day of doom, dragging him down to the strong house of death, and god Apollo left him. So from here we learn that Zeus is being fair. You know, he's got these symbols of the divine scales of justice kind of thing. So he weighs the fates of two men. Hector's falls. It's going to be Hector's day of doom. He's going to die today. This is a bit like Enkidu and Gilgamesh being weighed against each other by the gods. We also learned that Apollo left him. Until this moment, Apollo had been helping Hector run around. This is kind of horrible. Picture what this would look like. Hector and Achilles are the only fighters who are around the gates of Troy. Likely all of the Trojans are standing up on the walls of the city watching this, this would be horrifying. To see your best fighter running around your city, scared. And to know that his death means that your city is basically doomed to fall. Okay. What's interesting, even though Hector has this kind of moment that seems like maybe it's shameful, he is running from Achilles a lot, Homer is very even-handed in doling out honors in the final scene of their battle. So Hector's last attempt to kill Achilles has some honor to it. There's some glory in this. So try to picture it as I describe it. Okay, so shaft poised, Hector hurled, and his spear's long shadow flew, and it struck Achilles' shield, a dead center hit. But off and away it glanced, and Hector seethed his hurtling spear, his whole arm's power poured in a wasted shot. He stood there, cast down. So of course this is a wasted shot. It makes Hector very upset, because he put his whole the whole power of his arm was in this shot. You know, he threw his spear. And he hits it at the dead center. So that takes some skill. It's really difficult to hit anything in the center. If those of you who have played, you know, archery or darts or something. Hector does this. And keep in mind that Hector doesn't know that Achilles is using divine armor. You know, he probably assumes that Achilles is using regular armor. And perhaps Hector knows his strength and knows that if he, you know, uses his whole power of his arm and hits the shield in the direct center, perhaps he could have broken the shield and then, you know, gotten a hit on Achilles, where he most wanted to protect himself. So, like, this is, you know, there is some honor here, even though the kill shot is ineffective ultimately. Compare Achilles' shot. So after Hector tries, Achilles is like, okay, it's, you know, I'm going to win, basically. Okay, fire flared from the sharp point of the spear Achilles brandished high in his right hand, bent on Hector's death. Scanning his splendid body, where to pierce it best. The rest of his flesh seemed encased in armor, but one spot lay exposed, where collarbones lift the neck bone off the shoulder, the open throat, where the end of life comes quickest. There. As Hector charged in fury, brilliant Achilles drove his spear, and the point went stabbing clean through the tender neck. This is an interesting moment. In some ways, this shows how skilled Achilles is as a killer. He knows exactly where to stab that will bring about the sort of the end of life quickest. So the open throat, you know, exactly that exact spot. But one thing you might think about is tracking the fact that Achilles knows Hector's armor here. Remember that Hector had stolen Patroclus's armor, which was really Achilles' armor. So Hector here, he shows up to the battle. He means it to be sort of like a boast, like he's wearing. So Hector shows up to the battle wearing Achilles' armor. That's kind of understood. I think it's actually specified in the text. So when Achilles murders Hector, he knows where the weak spots of the armor are, because Achilles knows his old armor really well. It was his armor. So he's scanning the splendid body of Hector, where to pierce it best. Achilles knows exactly where to pierce it best. There's one spot that is exposed in his old armor. So Achilles, you know, would know that. You know, so just like Hector doesn't know Achilles' new armor, Achilles knows very intimately the armor that Hector is wearing. So there is a way in which you might kind of see that there's less glory kind of attributed to Achilles here, because just he has greater knowledge over the weak spots of Hector. So I hope that's clear. Let me know if that wasn't, you know, if that was a little confusing. And then he stabs him through the tender neck. He kills him almost like an animal. This is how animals are killed. You cut them in the throat so that the blood spills out quicker. This would be very hard to see if you were a Trojan watching. You know, you'd see your best soldier doing his best to like land an honorable blow in the middle of the shield. You'd probably expect the fight to go on a little bit longer, but no, Achilles kills him immediately. Okay. Okay, so then Achilles. All right, so Hector's death means Achilles will die soon. And Hector has this moment where he also has these great lines as he's dying. Here they are. At the point of death, Hector, his helmet flashing, said, I know you well. I see my fate before me. Never a chance that I could win you over. Iron inside your chest, that heart of yours. But now beware, or my curse will draw God's wrath upon your head. That day when Paris and Lord Apollo, for all your fighting heart, will destroy you at the Scaean gates. This is as close as we will get to the implication that Achilles will die. Hector seems to know the future here. So at the point of death, he says, I see my fate before me, etc. He says, beware my curse. So Hector's cursing Achilles. That day when Paris and Lord Apollo destroy you at the Scaean gates. This is exactly how Achilles is fated to die. Achilles, the best fighter on the Greek side, he actually will be killed by Paris, this sort of weak brother who is only really good at loving. Paris is the one, with the help of Apollo, who they launch an arrow. The arrow stabs Achilles in his one weak point, which is his heel, and that's how Achilles dies. So this kind of like shameful death at the hands of Paris. One thing to kind of highlight here, though, I know you well, I see my fate before me. This is pretty ominous language. I mean, ostensibly, Hector means, I see that you're going to kill me. Like, I know that my fate is death. I see that you're going to kill me. But remember that Hector is also wearing Achilles' armor here. There's a way in which that this line, I know you well, I see my fate before me, this could also be spoken by Achilles. Achilles knows Hector well because he knows the armor that Hector is wearing. I see my fate before me. There is a way in which Achilles, in killing Hector, is killing himself. Right? So like literally, Achilles kills a man wearing his old armor. He sort of kills a version of himself. And then also, because of the cycle of deaths, in killing Hector, he's sealing his own fate, and he will kill himself too. So there is a way in which this scene between Achilles' Achilles killing Hector is sort of, it's a bit like a suicide almost. So let me know if you want to talk more about that. It's very interesting. So Homer is being very, I mean, this is so poetic, so many implications here. Okay, Hector's body. This becomes the final kind of problem of the epic. So like I said, with these other bodies, Sarpedon's body, Patroclus' body, now Hector's body is an issue. Okay. Achilles has killed Hector, and while he was the only Trojan out on the field of battle, there's no one there to protect him. Achilles triumphed, and now he was bent on outrage, on shaming noble Hector. Piercing the tendons, ankle to heel behind both feet, he knotted straps of rawhide through them both, lashed them to his chariot, left the head to drag, and mounting the car, hoisting the famous arms abroad. He whipped his team to a run, and breakneck on they flew, holding nothing back, and a thick cloud of dust rose up from the man they dragged, his dark hair swirling round that head so handsome once, all tumbled low in the dust, since Zeus had given him over to his enemies now, to be defiled in the land of his own fathers. This is such a scene of outrage, outrage, defiling. Achilles is ruthless here. He strips Hector of his armor, which again was Achilles' armor. So Hector's now naked and being strapped to the back of Achilles' chariot, while Achilles drags the naked body through the dust around the city's walls. This is very cold, like ruthless behavior. Here's an image of it. I mean, this is so you can see like the Trojans watching from the walls, seeing, their best man, the best citizen, the best father, the best husband, etc. here being completely defiled while everyone's cheering on this side. And yeah, in some ways you kind of get it. You get that these guys are glorying over their achievements. On the other hand, oh my gosh, think of how the Trojans feel. Okay. Going back to the Greek, so after the death of Hector, Achilles brings Hector's body back to his ships. They have these war game kind of celebration things to celebrate their win over Hector. They have a lot of celebrations, and then this is a moment where Achilles finds himself still really sad. Even though the games were over now, the gathered armies scattered each man to his fast ship, and fighters turned their minds to thoughts of food and the sweet, warm grip of sleep. But Achilles kept on grieving for his friend. The memory burned on, and all subduing sleep could not take him. Not now. He turned and twisted side to side. He longed for Patroclus's manhood, his gallant heart, what rough campaigns they'd fought to an end together, what hardships they had suffered, cleaving their way through wars of men and pounding waves at sea. The memories flooded over him, live tears flowing, and now he'd lie on his side, now flat on his back, now face down again. At last he'd leap to his feet, wander in anguish, aimless along the surf, and dawn on dawn, flaming over the sea and shore, would find him pacing. Then he'd yoke his racing team to the chariot harness, lash the corpse of Hector behind the car for dragging, and haul him 3 times round the dead Patroclus's tomb. And then he'd rest again in his tents and leave the body sprawled face down in the dust. Yikes. Obviously, Achilles is really hurting. He really misses Patroclus and his manhood. He's crying. He can't sleep. He's, pacing around in the sea, in the shore, and all this stuff. And then it seems like when he feels sad, he again turns to anger at Hector. So the sadness causes him to yoke, so that means tie the corpse of Hector to his cart again and drag him around some more so he feels better. So this is pretty bad, this is not a good way to cope with your grief. Just, this is a recommendation from me, don't do this. And then we have this last scene, which is pretty amazing. This is on a vase, an image kind of just depicting the last kind of major scene of the epic. There's a moment where it's called here the ransom of Hector. Hector, this is his body, Hector's body down here, naked, underneath the bed of Achilles. That's Achilles here, and this is Priam, old King Priam, old balding man. So Priam ransoms. Ransom is kind of an interesting word, but Priam goes to Achilles to beg for his son's body back. Here's some close-ups. Like, picture this: if you're if you're a father begging for the body of your son who's dead, of the man who killed him, while that body is underneath the bed. It's pretty creepy. Oh man, pretty meaningful. Okay, so this is the thing finally that quells Achilles' rage. This scene here. So let's talk about it. Priam bravely goes to Achilles to ask for Hector's body. So picture this. Priam is a very old man. He knows his city is doomed. He knows he has no hope. He knows that he's going to probably die soon too. And yet, he braves going into the home of the greatest warrior and the man who killed his son, Achilles, his camp. So, this is pretty brave. He gets help from Mercury for this, but by Mercury I mean Hermes. Sorry, Mercury is the Roman name for Hermes, which is the Greek name. Okay. Priam, this is how he appeals to Achilles. He tells him, "Remember your own father, great godlike Achilles, as old as I am, past the threshold of deadly old age. No doubt the countrymen round about him plague him now, with no one there to defend him, beat away disaster. No one. But at least he hears you're still alive, and his old heart rejoices, hopes rising day by day, to see his beloved son come sailing home from Troy. But I, dear God, my life so cursed by fate, I fathered hero sons in the wide realm of Troy, and now not a single one is left, I tell you. 50 sons I had when the sons of Achaea came. Many, most of them violent Ares, cut the knees from under." Ares is the god of war, by the way. Athena is the god of wartime strategy. Ares is the god of carnage, war carnage. Okay, so 50 sons I had, violent Ares cut them down. That's a way of saying war killed my sons. But one was left me to guard my walls, my people, the one you killed the other day, defending his fatherland, my Hector. It's all for him I've come to the ships now, to win him back from you. I bring a priceless ransom. Revere the gods, Achilles, pity me in my own right, remember your own father. I deserve more pity. I have endured what no one on earth has ever done before. I put my lips to the hands of the man who killed my son." Okay, so, I hope you can hear how poignant this is. This old man who has no sons left, begging the man who killed his son to pity him and give that body back. One thing that I think it's pretty straightforward here, but one thing that you might not have thought about is how interesting this moment is. He tells him to remember his own father. Like, okay, Achilles, think of your own father. So Peleus, the mortal man who married Thetis. No doubt the countrymen round about Peleus plague him now with no one there to defend him, beat away disaster, no one. So Priam says, at least Peleus, at least your father hears you're still alive, and his old heart rejoices, hopes rising day by day to see his beloved son come sailing home from Troy. Priam here is using, this is it's a rhetorical strategy. He's saying, listen, Achilles, at least your father knows he'll see you again in the future. Priam assumes that Achilles will go home and go to his father and get to greet his father again. We know as the readers, and Achilles knows, that Achilles will die at Troy. But Priam doesn't know that. Priam thinks Achilles won and he'll get to go home. So this is a really interesting moment. Here you might, potentially Achilles could say, that's not true. Actually, I'm going to die here too, so things are pretty bad for me. But Achilles doesn't say that. He lets Priam believe in this sort of imagined scene where a son and a father are reunited. Because this is a moment where a father is begging for the body of his dead son, and a son who's about to die knows he'll never see his father again. So we have this kind of lovely moment between father and son, but they're not related. It's the father of one man from one side of the conflict, then the son of a man on the other side, and kind of vice versa. It's kind of a lovely scene. And so Priam asks Achilles to think of his father, and so Achilles does. He thinks of his own father. So he says, so with my father Peleus, what glittering gifts the gods rained down from the day that he was born. He excelled all men in wealth and pride of place. He lorded the Myrmidons, and mortal that he was, they gave the man an immortal goddess for a wife. Yes, but even on him the father piled hardships, no powerful race of princes born in his royal halls, only a single son he fathered, doomed at birth, cut off in the spring of life. And I give the man no care as he grows old, since here I sit at Troy, far from my fatherland, a grief to you, a grief to all your children. So here seems to be the moment where Achilles he finally gets outside of his own grief and his own rage in order to think about his father, Peleus, and Hector's father, Priam. So he's like, yeah, Peleus. Peleus, he had such gifts, and yet he was also doomed. Because he has a son like me. I give that man no care as he grows old, since here I sit at Troy. So Achilles, feeling like a really bad son to his father, who he'll never see again. And so because he'll never see his own father again, because he feels like a bad son, he decides to give the body of Hector back to the father, Priam. Because Hector was a good son, he tried his best. Yeah. So anyway, okay. And then this is the last moments of the epic rely on Hector's burial. They center on it. Here's the last line of the epic, and this might have surprised you if you read it. It seems kind of like lackluster, perhaps, but I want us to contemplate why this is a fitting ending for the epic. To focus on Hector's burial, here's a scene depiction of it where he looks an awful lot like Jesus, if you guys know sort of Christian iconography. This is Hector. Okay. And so the Trojans buried Hector, breaker of horses. So why do you think this is the last line of the epic? Why is this fitting? I'm definitely going to have a discussion question about this for you guys. Why is the Iliad, why is it best ended here? Like, we don't get to see Achilles die, for example. Why not? It's sort of implied. Achilles' death is kind of lackluster, etc. Why end the Iliad here? Remember, Iliad, I told you that term is related to the word Ilium, which is another term for Troy. The Iliad is not just the story of Achilles, it's the story of Troy, the story of the fall of Troy. And so in a sense, there's a way in which the burial of Hector encapsulates the story of Troy. He was the best soldier on the Trojan side. With the death of Hector, the fall of Troy is implied. One thing too that you might not have thought of, the Trojans buried Hector, breaker of horses. This is one of the last moments that the Trojans together as a civilization can do something honorable together. Very shortly after this moment, Troy will be sacked, meaning the Greeks will go into the city and steal everything that they want. They'll take all the treasure they want, they'll enslave the people they want to enslave, they'll kill everyone else, pretty much. But Achilles lets the Trojans take Hector's body back, and he gives them, I think it's like 11 or 12 days to hold burial rites and a funeral for Hector. So Achilles gives them this moment of ritual and kind of like a glorious expression of their culture, even though that culture is doomed, but they still get to express it. So this is sort of like a love letter in a sense to Troy, this ruined kingdom that that is destined to fall. But they get to have this one moment where they can honor their best soldier. Also, think about Achilles' rage here. I told you that the epic begins with Achilles' rage, melis, that term that means the rage of the gods. It's the rage that Achilles has. Here, this line definitely implies that Achilles' rage has finally been quelled. It's finally over. Achilles lets the Trojans have this moment with their fallen soldier. He lets them bury them. Of course, he's no longer angry then. Like, a man would never let this happen if he was still harboring anger for his own fate or for the circumstances. You know? So anyway, I might ask you to kind of think a little bit more about that, like why this is a poignant and appropriate ending for the epic. But I'll end this lecture there. I think we might have gone a little long, but yeah. Okay.